little whiner, and then I got to go, oh no, this is just a speed bump. And so, maybe I'll be healed of it, maybe I won't, but I'm trying to picture the healthiest Timothy as possible. And, God's will, not mine, but let's picture me as healthy and whole, not as someone who's sick. And when we look deeper at each other in that sacred way, when they walk in the doors, that's the starting point of healing. Not seeing someone as damaged goods, but seeing them deeper than that. In the Mayan tradition, they have a phrase that's called in Lakesh, which loosely translated means, I'm you, you're me. And more narrowly translated means, I am your other you. You are my other me. We are one. That's the we program. So we see ourselves in others, and we see others in ourselves. We're coming from a place of compassion, nothing less. And then when I was working at Fellowship Club, I got a picture by the sign in the hallway, and I cut off half of my face because I thought it looked cooler. But I've lived by that prayer big time, 100 times a day sometimes. Earlier on, 100 times a minute it seemed. But here is the woman that brought me into MAD. Mary Jo Robinson came to our recovery group. I love it that I can say this part. This part I can say in MAD, and I try and avoid the alcoholic and all that, and where I go. But I was at the Stillwater Club. I was sober for 90 days. And they had slated Mary Jo Robinson to come speak to our group, right? And it had underneath her name, MAD member. And I thought, oh my God, what idiot would invite a MAD speaker to a recovery celebration event? Did somebody relapse? Were they hitting the bong and then going to the phone book and just leaving? I was experiencing that tape recording in my head that played about MAD. And I had pictured her as a certain kind of a way. I had removed any possibility that she was going to say something good. I was only stuck in this negative part. And I was experiencing a thing called contempt prior to investigation, otherwise known as prejudice. And having never heard her utter a single word, how can I have an opinion about what she's going to say? But when she came into the room and introduced herself, she said, hi, I'm Mary Jo Robinson, a sober alcoholic by the grace of God, 21 or 22 years at that time. I thought, oh my gosh, she's us. Of course she's being invited here. And I just thought I was going to hear some god-awful story about losing a loved one and hearing what that tragedy looked like, and I'm going to be just pulled down to that painful place that I didn't want to experience for a lot of personal reasons, but I wasn't consciously aware of that yet, And this woman's story that she told that day changed my life. 100% changed my life. I took a whole new direction, and it's not one that I even guessed was possible. The part of her story, she did talk about losing her son, Mark. He was killed by an alcohol-impaired driver when he was sober for 10 years. He had devoted his life to helping other alcoholics get sober and stay sober. He was given away what he was so freely given. And now he's killed by an alcohol-impaired driver. And he was killed instantly, according to Mary Jo's story. She said, I chose to believe that. That's what the EMT said. And she wasn't sure it was true, but it gave her some comfort. And but the part of her story that just nailed my heart, it just opened and activated my heart, was how she conducted herself in the courtroom at the time of the sentencing of this young man. She's standing on one side of the courtroom, he's standing on the other side of the courtroom, behind their respective lecterns, and she's looking at this guy, and he has to listen to her give a victim impact statement, right? But she wanted him to look at her when she gave the statement, so she asked him, would you please look at me when I give you my victim impact statement? And the guy was just looking at the floor of the courtroom. So she asked a second time, would you please look at me when I give you my statement? Again, he didn't look at her. And the reason I think he didn't look at her is because he's in despair over this. It's like, how can you look in the eyes of a mom, you know you killed her son? That would probably be one of the hardest things a person could do, right? I mean, a lot of us drove under the influence, but if you would have hit and killed someone, you might be in a situation where you're thinking about killing yourself because you can't live with the idea that you killed someone's child, right? And if somebody killed your child driving under the influence, suicide might not cross your mind, but homicide might, you know? So we're talking about life and death. And with her words, she's holding the keys to life and death for this young man. He had just graduated from college, went to a kegger, stopped drinking at 1 in the morning, got on the road at 5:15, and at 5:30 collided head-on with Mark on Highway 94 in St. Paul. He was going the wrong direction down 94, and Mark didn't see it coming. And he's gone. And now Mary Jo wants to give her victim impact statement, and this guy can't look at her. So Mary Jo broke a rule. She came out from behind her lectern and started crossing the courtroom. And in the center of her courtroom, because of an adversarial system, you have a visible line that you're never supposed to cross, neither physically or metaphorically, because it can screw up a case. And not only that, they might worry about you're going to go over and hurt this guy, right? Well, Judge Campbell, which officiated the courtroom, did not prevent Mary Jo from approaching the young man. She crossed that invisible line, and he didn't signal the bailiffs, like, get the crazy bitch out of the courtroom, you know, or any of that stuff. He watched her with great peace in his heart because he had been in chambers with her. He knew the direction that she was going. And they had discussions about it. But the young man's mom is sitting probably in this position to support him. And when Mary Jo was approaching his lectern, she looked over and saw his mom, and their eyes connected. And when their eyes connected, Mary Jo said, this woman had daggers in her eyes. Like, don't you hurt my son. He knows what he's done. He doesn't need more because of you. And Mary Jo's a mom too, you know, and she had compassion for where she was coming from, but she can't stop and say, well, here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I'm going to do. So she just approached the young man who killed her son and asked him again, would you please look at me when I give you my victim impact statement? And I'm going to move this lectern to the center of this room, like I'm her and you are the offender, right? Mary Jo asked him to look at her, and he's still looking at the ground. He couldn't bring himself to do it, so she raised up her hand to his chin, placed it underneath his chin, and asked his permission one more time. She said, son, would you please look at me when I give you my victim impact statement? And this time, he allowed it. And she gently and respectfully and lovingly rolls up his face, and as soon as their eyes touch, she said, I want you to know something. I want you to know that I love you and I forgive you for killing my son. I love you and I forgive you for killing my son. And those powerful words was not what he expected to hear. And he broke down crying, of course. He had holy water coming out of his face, if you will. And as soon as he started crying, she stepped behind his lectern, placed her arms around him in a big hug, holding him while he cried uncontrollably in her arms, and kept repeating those healing words of love. I love you, I forgive you. I love you, I forgive you, over and over until he stopped sobbing. And she could have killed him with a few words, but instead she said that. And if he would have been on suicide's door, she walked up to him and says, I think you're a scumbag. You know, you're a dirtbag. Why don't you just go back to your cell and kill yourself, because you don't deserve to be on planet Earth. You killed my son. He's gone. You should be gone too. And it's possible if he was on death's door, man, because of wanting to commit suicide, because he's so full of grief, he might have went back to his cell and killed himself. That's a possibility, you know. We never know what we're going to do when these things happen in our life. We have no idea what our lives are going to look like, you know. But instead of installing something really painful to carry for the rest of his life beyond what he's already obviously dealing with, she put those words there. Why did she do that? I asked her later, how could you do that? I never thought I'd hear mom say that. And she said, well, one, I'm a Christian. Two, I'm in recovery. And she was a Christian counselor at that time, you know, and she was running around preaching love and forgiveness. And she said, now that life is really tough, what am I going to do? Am I going to forgive? Or am I going to tear this guy a new one? You know? She said, I got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. There's a part of her that wanted the lambasting, but she knew she couldn't do that. And anyone can forgive. You don't have to be a Christian to forgive. You don't have to be in recovery to forgive. Anyone can forgive. You know, it's a human potential, but when we do it, it makes our lives better. Sometimes the person that we're trying to forgive, sometimes we're just trying, we realize that once that happens and we forgive them, even if they don't deserve it, even if they don't want it, they care less. As soon as we do it, we feel better. Our lives get better. We deserve peace, and that's why we deserve do that. We deserve a better life. In an Al-Anon, they say a person is as happy as they make up their mind to be. And Mary Jo proved that she was going to go deeper than the offense that required the presence of the forgiveness. Forgiveness is more powerful than the offense, which is required to bring forgiveness into action. You can't have forgiveness without an offense. So thank God for the offense. Give thanks in all things, not just the easy stuff. You know, we're commanded to do that if you happen to be, you know, a Christian. And Mary Jo, you know, stepped forward. She lived that. And I think she helped this guy get well. Seriously. He put his life back together, you know. He had never driven under the influence again. They keep records of people mad that injure and kill him. So they did some research and found out, I don't know how they found out, he had gotten married, he had several children, holding down a good job. So he had some measure of success. And there's a lot of measurements of success. Those are just some of them. But no more offenses. He wasn't an alcoholic. He was just a problem drinker. The problem was he was behind the wheel and operating it under the influence. You don't have to be an alcoholic to kill someone. And so Mary Jo's story of love and forgiveness nailed me, and I just shared with her something I never thought I'd tell anyone. I didn't even say anything to anyone in AA. I said, Mary Jo, I drove under the influence and I killed someone's child. And I gave her a little bit of detail, and she said, oh my gosh, Timothy, I need you and Matt to come down and speak with us. And I said, oh my gosh, Mary Jo, that's not going to happen. I'm not a speaker. Why would I want to tell somebody about the god-awful thing that I did? And then let them think that I'm a dirtbag, you know? And now what am I doing? I'm playing that contempt prior to investigation. I had never spoken before, but I just already know how you're going to react to me. The truth is, that's how I was reacting to myself. 99% of my problems in life are of my own making. The prison we construct in our own mind is always more secure than the physical prison that humans can construct to keep us locked up. I've seen people in prison that were more free than a lot of us out here. You know, it's an inside job. We hold the keys, and for me, there is one who has all power even in prison. God came to me and did miracles and helped me. I remember when the associate warden had to hear me talk about God one day, and he was mad, you know. And I said, no, God's got this deal, man. You don't have any power over me. And he slammed his hand down on his desk, and bam! And he said, in this prison, I'm God. Well, 2 years later, God had a heart attack. And I didn't wish that on him, of course, you know. I just thought it was ironic, you know. And so, thank you, Mary Jo, for challenging me that day to come into MAD, and I still objected. And she said, Timothy, when we're asked to do service work in this program, guess what? You don't get to say no. So you can zip that one. And secondly, what if your story could help somebody not do what you did? What if you're going to help an alcoholic that is still suffering that's in that audience? Might only be 1 out of 5 people, maybe less. But you might be helping a still suffering alcoholic, and plus it might just help someone anyway. So who are you to deny people your story? Because you're embarrassed, you know? And I said, I get that, Mary Jo. I felt trapped. It's like I was nowhere to run with arguments. And I said, I just don't think I can do it. I'm not a speaker. And she said, come to a MAD panel, check it out, see what you think. I went to a MAD panel just to listen, and I saw so many synchronicities between those speakers that paralleled my life in so many personal ways. It would have been impossible to construct that situation. Somebody else was doing it, and that one was God, I think. I saw the writing on the wall, that this is where God needed me. This is my work. This is my mission. So MAD became my mission. And it was really hard to speak at first. You know, I spoke for a minute or something, sat on sobbing. And over time, you know, things got a little better in that department. But there was something that was happening that I didn't expect. I wanted to commit suicide after speaking. I talked at a MAD panel, and while I'm at the MAD panel, I felt better, you know. It appeared like people were appreciating it. They come up afterwards and say thanks. The MAD team is there. We're like family, and most of them were supportive of me, even though I was an offender. There's a couple that wouldn't speak on the same panel with me because they were still mad, you know, and that was okay. But I needed to do what I was doing, regardless of how other people received it, that couldn't handle it. And they have a right to be exactly where they're at. No one does grief the same way. We don't have a right to judge anyone for their journey. And just be the best people we can be and leave the outcome up to God, or at least that's what Mary Jo taught me. And but I didn't expect to want to commit suicide afterwards. I mean, I'd be driving my car home at night, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done to not crash my car into a bridge at 100 miles an hour or a tree and kill myself, to prove to you people how sorry I was for killing somebody's child. And there's been a couple of struggles I've had in sobriety that probably brought me more pain, like losing the alcoholic that was in my life to drinking. She died from drinking. That was a tough period. But thanks to God and the fellowship of Al-Anon, I didn't have to die along with her. And I wanted to die. That was a tougher period than even the reaction to killing someone's child. And here's the child I killed. Same name as me. Timothy killed Timothy on August 15th, 1977. I had 3.5 beers. I wasn't drunk. I was just alcohol impaired. I was in a stolen car. I was a young person. That's what I did back in those days. I would joyride in stolen cars. And I had ran away from treatment. They were looking for me, locked me up for failing treatment because of running away. And had I been successful at treatment and was humble enough to go through that process, it would have saved Timmy and it would have saved me a lifetime of grief. But instead, I ran away. And Timmy ended up dead. Timmy's mom, Sherry, is in the lower left-hand corner. She's the one that actually sent me these photographs.